The orphaned boy fixed a broken music box, unknowingly unlocking his family's secret legacy with each careful turn of his small screwdriver. 10-year-old Oliver Hayes had no idea that the tarnished brass contraption, discovered beneath a stack of forgotten books in the attic of Mrs. Abernathy's home for wayward children, would change everything. His fingers trembled slightly as he worked, not from the cold that seeped through the thin walls of the old Victorian house, but from excitement. Fixing things was the only time Oliver felt truly alive, truly himself. The rest of his existence was a careful dance of invisibility, head down in the hallways, quiet at mealtimes, small and unnoticeable when prospective parents came to visit. But alone with broken things spread before him, he became something else entirely. "You've got to know what's hurting before you can make it better," he whispered to himself, repeating the words his father had taught him before the accident 3 years ago. The memory came like a physical ache, a tightness in his chest that never quite went away. Sometimes he thought he could still smell his father's workshop, sawdust and metal polish, and the mint candies he kept in his pocket. The music box had been silent for decades, its mechanism frozen with age and neglect. Oliver had spent weeks carefully cleaning each gear and spring, oiling the delicate parts with a patience unusual for a child his age. The other children at Mrs. Abernathy's thought him strange. This quiet boy who collected broken watches and toy trains rather than playing kickball in the yard. Weirdo, they called him when they bothered to notice him at all. But Oliver didn't mind. Not really. Because things made sense in a way people never did. Things had reasons for breaking, and if you understood those reasons, you could make them whole again. People weren't so simple. The late afternoon sunlight slanted through the small dormer window, casting the attic in a golden glow that made the dust particles dance like tiny stars. Oliver's tongue poked out between his lips as he carefully aligned the final gear. One last turn of the key, wound with nervous anticipation, and music. Sweet, clear notes spilled into the dusty attic, a melody so hauntingly familiar that Oliver's breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered against his ribs as the simple tune filled the space around him, somehow making the vast emptiness of the attic feel smaller, warmer. He had heard this song before, in fragments of dreams and distant memories. His mother's soft voice humming as she tucked him into bed, his father whistling as he worked in his shop. The melody wrapped around him like an embrace, and for the first time in 3 years, tears filled Oliver's eyes and spilled freely down his cheeks. As the last notes faded, something clicked inside the box. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small brass key and a yellowed photograph. With trembling fingers, Oliver lifted the photograph into the fading light. A family, his family. His father, younger but unmistakable, his mother's gentle smile, and between them, a baby that could only be him. They stood before a shop with a sign that read Hayes Family Clockworks in elegant script. And there, sitting on a table in the window of the shop, was the very same music box he now held in his hands. Oliver turned the photograph over. In faded ink, a message was written. "Remember, Oliver, time reveals all treasures to those patient enough to wait. You are our greatest treasure. Find your way home." Home. The word echoed in his mind like the last notes of the music box. He had no home, not anymore. Just a bed in a crowded room in a house that belonged to no one and everyone. Yet somehow the music box and the photograph whispered of something else. Something waiting to be found. Mrs. Abernathy found him there an hour later, still clutching the music box, the photograph tucked safely in his pocket. Her perpetually pinched expression softened slightly at the sight of his tear-stained face. "Dinner's ready, Oliver," she said, her voice gentler than usual. "And there's someone here to see you." Oliver looked up, confusion replacing the wonder that had filled him moments before. No one ever came to see him, not since the social worker had dropped him off 3 years ago, with a suitcase of clothes that no longer fit and a teddy bear missing one eye. "Who, he asked, his voice barely audible. Mrs. Abernathy hesitated, an unreadable expression crossing her face. "A Mr. Elliot says he's a lawyer, says he's been looking for you for quite some time." The music box felt suddenly heavy in Oliver's hands. He wound it once more, letting the melody fill the growing darkness of the attic as the sun dipped below the horizon. Something was changing. He could feel it in the air, in the way his heart beat just a little faster, in the way the world seemed to hold its breath around him. Mr. Elliot was a tall man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He sat across from Oliver in Mrs. Abernathy's small office, a leather briefcase open on his lap, filled with papers that seemed important in the way that adult things often did, mysterious and somehow life-altering. "I've been searching for you for almost 3 years, Oliver," he said, his voice deep and warm. "After your parents' accident, things became complicated. Your father's will was missing, and without it, we couldn't properly execute his wishes." Oliver stared at his scuffed shoes, the music box clutched tightly in his hands. He didn't understand what this man wanted from him, why he had come after all this time when everyone else had forgotten. "But last month," Mr. Elliot continued, "during renovations of your family's old shop, we found a safe hidden behind a false wall. Inside was your father's will, along with some other documents." He paused, studying Oliver's face carefully. "He left everything to you, Oliver. The shop, the house above it, and, well, quite a substantial trust fund. Your father was more successful than many people realized." The words washed over Oliver like waves, too big and powerful to comprehend. He focused instead on the music box in his hands, the one tangible connection to a past that was becoming less distant with every word Mr. Elliot spoke. "There's something else," the lawyer said, his voice softening further. "Your father's business partner, Mr. Thomas Whitaker, has been maintaining the shop all these years, hoping you would be found. He ... He was named as your guardian in the will, should anything happen to your parents." Oliver's head snapped up. "My guardian? But I don't know any Mr. Whitaker." Mr. Elliot smiled gently. "You were very young when he moved away to open another branch of the business. But he knew your father since they were boys. They were like brothers." He leaned forward. "He's waited a long time to meet you again, Oliver. He never stopped looking for you." Something stirred in Oliver's memory. A tall man with a booming laugh who gave him wooden puzzles and called him Little Clockmaker. The memory was faint, like trying to catch the smoke, but it was there. Can I see the shop?" Oliver asked, surprising himself with the question. Mr. Elliot's smile widened. "That's exactly why I'm here. If Mrs. Abernathy approves, I'd like to take you there tomorrow. Mr. Whitaker is waiting." That night, Oliver couldn't sleep. He lay in his narrow bed, the music box on the small table beside him, playing its melody over and over until the other boys grumbled and complained. Only then did he stop, but he kept the box close, his fingers tracing the intricate engravings on its surface. Home. The word whispered through his dreams when he finally drifted off, carried on the notes of the music box's song. The Hayes family clockwork shop stood on a quiet corner of Mulberry Street, its large display windows gleaming in the morning sunlight. The brick building looked exactly as it had in the photograph, except for a fresh coat of paint on the trim and new flowers in the window boxes. Time seemed to have passed around it rather than through it. Oliver stood on the sidewalk frozen as Mr. Elliot waited patiently beside him. The music box was secure in his backpack, the only thing he had insisted on bringing from Mrs. Abernathy's. Everything else could stay behind. "Take your time, Mr. Elliot said softly. "It's a lot to take in." Oliver nodded, his throat too tight for words. After 3 years of having nothing that belonged to him, nothing that connected him to his past, he suddenly had too much. It was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose. The bell above the door jingled merrily as they stepped inside. The shop was filled with clocks of every size and description. Grandfather clocks standing like sentinels against the walls. Delicate mantel clocks arranged on shelves. Pocket watches gleaming in glass cases. The air smelled of wood polish and metal and time itself. The gentle ticking of dozens of timepieces filled the space with a soothing rhythm that immediately calmed the frantic beating of Oliver's heart. And there, behind the counter, stood a man who could only be Thomas Whitaker. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a neatly trimmed beard now more gray than brown, he looked up as the bell announced their arrival. The moment his eyes landed on Oliver, they widened with recognition and something deeper, a grief and joy so intertwined that Oliver couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. "Oliver," Thomas said, his voice breaking on the name. "You look just like your father." Oliver didn't know what to say, how to feel. This stranger knew him, had known his parents, had been waiting for him all this time. It was too much and not enough all at once. Instead of speaking, Oliver reached into his backpack and carefully removed the music box. He placed it on the counter between them, a bridge across the years of separation. Thomas stared at the box, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out to touch it. "James's masterpiece," he whispered. "He made this for your mother when you were born. We thought it was lost in the fire." "Fire?" Oliver asked, finding his voice at last. Thomas looked up, his expression clouding. There's much to explain, Oliver. Much that you deserve to know. He glanced at Mr. Elliot, who nodded encouragingly. But first, would you like to see the workshop? Your father's workbench is still there, just as he left it. The workshop behind the main shop was a large, airy space with high ceilings and windows that let in streams of natural light. Workbenches lined the walls covered with tools and half-finished projects. In the center stood a large oak desk, its surface clear except for a leather-bound book and a single-frame photograph. The same image that Oliver had found in the music box, but larger, showing more of the storefront and the proud parents with their infant son. This was your father's space, Thomas said, his hand resting lightly on Oliver's shoulder. No one has used it since. Well, since the accident. I've kept everything just as it was. Oliver moved toward the desk as if drawn by an invisible thread. His fingers traced the edge of the wood, worn smooth by years of his father's hands. The leather book, he now saw, was a journal, the pages filled with sketches of clocks and watches, notes on mechanisms and materials. Your father was a genius with timepieces. Thomas continued, watching Oliver with a gentle expression. He could hear what was wrong with a clock just by listening to it tick. Said every clock had its own voice, its own story. He paused, swallowing hard. He was teaching you, even when you were tiny. You would sit on his lap at this very desk, watching him work for hours. Never saw a child with such patience. Oliver opened the journal, turning the pages carefully. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet somehow recognizable, as if his hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. Toward the back, he found sketches of the music box, detailed drawings of its mechanism and case, measurements and notes in his father's precise handwriting. And there on the final page, a message. For Oliver, when he's ready to carry on our legacy. Time is the greatest gift we have, and the most precious thing we can give. Never forget that each moment is a treasure, each second a possibility. The Hayes family has always been keepers of time, not just its measurement, but its meaning. One day, you'll understand what that truly means. Until then, listen to the music box when you need to remember that you are never alone. Love, Dad. The words blurred as tears filled Oliver's eyes. He had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of his grief and abandonment in silence. Now standing in his father's workshop, surrounded by the tools of a craft that somehow lived in his own hands, he felt the first fragile stirrings of belonging. The music box, he said suddenly, looking up at Thomas. I fixed it. It was broken, but I fixed it. Thomas smiled, tears shining in his own eyes. Of course you did. You're James Hayes' son. It's in your blood. But what did he mean about being keepers of time? About our legacy? Thomas moved to a large cabinet against the far wall. That, my boy, is a longer story. One that begins nearly 200 years ago with your great-great-great-grandfather, Elias Hayes. He unlocked the cabinet with a key from his pocket, revealing shelves filled with leather-bound volumes similar to the journal on the desk. The Hayes family history is all here, journals kept by every clockmaker in your lineage. Your father wanted you to read them when you were old enough. Oliver stared at the volumes, each representing a lifetime of knowledge, of stories, of the legacy he had never known existed. Am I old enough now? Thomas studied him for a long moment. I believe you are. You've endured more than anyone your age should have to. You've proven your patience and skill by fixing that music box. He placed a gentle hand on Oliver's shoulder. But there's no rush. These books, this shop, this legacy, they're all yours now. We have time. Time. The word resonated through Oliver like the clear notes of the music box. For 3 years, time had been his enemy, stretching endlessly through lonely days and nightmare-filled nights. Now suddenly it felt like a gift again, full of possibility. Can you teach me? Oliver asked, his voice small but determined. About the clocks, about everything my father would have taught me? Thomas's face lit up with a smile that erased years from his features. Nothing would honor your father's memory more. We'll start tomorrow. He hesitated, then added gently, but first there's one more thing I need to show you. Thomas led Oliver through a door at the back of the workshop and up a narrow staircase. They emerged into a spacious apartment that occupied the entire upper floor of the building. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating rooms furnished with comfortable, well-worn pieces that spoke of a home well-loved. This is where your parents lived, Thomas explained. Where you lived until you were 7. After the accident, I couldn't bear to change anything. He moved through the space with the familiarity of someone who had kept vigil here for years, straightening a picture frame, adjusting a cushion. I've come up every week to dust and air it out, to keep it ready. Oliver stood frozen in the center of the living room, overwhelmed by the sensation of déjà vu. He knew this place, the arrangement of furniture, the color of the walls, the way the light fell across the wooden floor. Memories flickered at the edges of his consciousness, not quite formed, but undeniably present. "Your room is down the hall," Thomas said softly. "Would you like to see it?" Oliver nodded, unable to speak. He followed Thomas down a short hallway lined with photographs. His parents' wedding day, his father and Thomas as young men standing proudly before the shop, his mother holding an infant Oliver in her arms. At the end of the hall, Thomas stopped before a door painted deep blue with silver stars. "Your father painted these stars to match the constellations visible on the night you were born," Thomas explained. "Said you came into the world under the watchful eyes of the universe." He opened the door and Oliver's breath caught in his throat. The room was exactly as a 7-year-old boy would have left it. Toy trains on shelves, books stacked neatly on a small desk, a telescope by the window, and a bed with a quilt patterned with gears and clock faces. But what made Oliver's heart skip was the mural painted on the ceiling, a perfect replica of the night sky with constellations connected by thin golden lines. "I used to lie here and find shapes," he whispered, the memory surfacing suddenly and clearly. "Dad would tell me stories about each one, about how the stars are like the gears in a clock, all moving together in perfect time." Thomas nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "He spent months on that mural. Said you deserved to have the universe watching over you even when you slept." Oliver moved to the bed and sat down, running his hand over the quilt. Everything felt smaller than he remembered, but no less magical. On the bedside table sat a small, half-assembled clock, its parts arranged neatly beside tools sized for a child's hands. "My first project," he said, the words coming from some deep place of knowing. "Dad was teaching me how to build a clock from scratch." "You were a natural," Thomas confirmed. "He said you had the hands of a master clockmaker, even then." Oliver looked up at the man who had kept his home and his legacy safe, who had waited and searched for him when everyone else had given up. "Why did no one tell me? After the accident, why was I sent to Mrs. Abernathy's instead of to you?" Thomas's face darkened with an old anger and grief. "I was in Switzerland when it happened, securing a contract with a prestigious watch company. By the time I returned, you had been placed in the system. Your father's will was missing. We now know it was in that hidden safe, and without it, I had no legal claim to you." His hands clenched into fists. "I searched everywhere for you, hired investigators, petitioned the courts, but somewhere records were mixed up, files were lost. It was as if someone wanted you to disappear. But why?" "Who would want that?" Thomas sighed heavily. "That's part of the legacy your father wanted to explain when you were older. The Hayes family has always been more than simple clockmakers. The clocks and watches they created were special, valuable beyond their craftsmanship. There have always been people who coveted what your family could create." Oliver frowned, trying to understand. "Special how?" "That's a conversation for another day," Thomas said gently, "when you've had time to settle in, to feel at home again. For now, know that you're safe and that your family's legacy is intact, waiting for you to claim it when you're ready." Oliver nodded slowly, accepting that some answers would have to wait. He had found more today than he had dared to hope for in 3 years of loneliness. A home, a history, a future. "Can I stay here tonight?" he asked quietly. "In my room?" Thomas's expression softened with understanding. "Of course. This is your home, Oliver. You can stay here every night from now on if you want to." He hesitated. "I live in the apartment next door. Close enough if you need anything, but I understand if you'd prefer your space." Oliver thought about it, about being alone in this apartment filled with memories and ghosts. Maybe you could stay here, just for tonight, until I get used to it again." The relief that washed over Thomas's face was answer enough. "I'd be honored," he said simply. That night, after a dinner of pizza ordered from Oliver's once favorite restaurant, how had Thomas remembered? They sat in the living room while the music box played its gentle melody. The sound filled the apartment with a warmth that had been missing for 3 years, bringing color back to spaces that had existed too long in grayscale memory. "It was your mother's lullaby for you," Thomas explained as the music played. "Your father captured it in that box so you could hear it even when she was busy with her research." "Research?" Oliver perked up. "What did my mother do?" Thomas smiled. "Dr. Eleanor Hayes was a professor of quantum physics at the university. Brilliant woman. She and your father made quite the pair. He with his intuitive understanding of mechanical time, she with her theoretical work on the nature of time itself. Oliver absorbed this new information hungrily. Each detail about his parents felt like a missing puzzle piece slotting into place, completing a picture that had been fragmented for too long. "Tomorrow," Thomas said, watching Oliver's eyes grow heavy with exhaustion and emotion, "we'll begin properly. The shop opens at 9, but we'll start in the workshop at 7. Your father always said the early morning hours were when the clock spoke most clearly." Oliver nodded, fighting a yawn. The day had been overwhelming, a roller coaster of discoveries and feelings that left him emotionally drained, but filled with a cautious hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. As he climbed into his childhood bed that night, the music box playing softly on the nightstand, Oliver felt the first true peace he had known since the accident. The stars on his ceiling seemed to twinkle with approval, welcoming him home. Thomas had left the door ajar, and the soft sounds of him moving about in the living room provided a comforting reminder that Oliver was no longer alone. Just before sleep claimed him, Oliver whispered into the darkness, "I found my way home, Dad." Just like you said, the weeks that followed took on a rhythm as precise and comforting as the ticking of a well-made clock. Oliver woke each morning to the smell of coffee and toast, dressed quickly, and joined Thomas in the workshop by 7. The older man proved to be a patient teacher, guiding Oliver through the basics of clock repair and maintenance before slowly introducing the more complex aspects of the craft. To Oliver's surprise, much of it came naturally to him, as if his hands remembered what his mind had forgotten. The delicate work of adjusting escapements, cleaning and oiling movements, and calibrating pendulums felt like conversations with old friends. Each timepiece had its own personality, its own voice, just as his father had always said. The shop opened at 9, and Oliver watched from the workshop as Thomas greeted customers, many of whom had been coming to Hayes Family Clockworks for decades. Some remembered Oliver as a small child and marveled at how he had grown. Their genuine delight at his return made him feel anchored to this place in ways he hadn't expected. In the afternoons when business was slow, Thomas began sharing the Hayes family history, starting with Elias Hayes, who had opened the first shop in London in 1823. Oliver learned how each generation had added to the family's reputation for exceptional craftsmanship, how they had survived wars and depressions by creating timepieces that lasted lifetimes. But there were gaps in the stories, places where Thomas would hesitate or change the subject. Oliver noticed but didn't press. He sensed that whatever secrets the Hayes legacy contained, Thomas was waiting for the right moment to reveal them. Meanwhile, Oliver began reading his father's journals in the evenings, poring over the detailed notes and sketches. James Hayes had been methodical in documenting his work, but also deeply philosophical about the nature of time itself. Interspersed with technical diagrams were passages that read more like poetry. Time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean with currents and depths, stillnesses and storms. We do not measure time, we merely mark our passage through it. The true clockmaker understands that each second contains eternity, if only we could learn to see it. These passages confused Oliver, but they also resonated with something deep within him, some understanding that lay just beyond his conscious grasp. One evening, about a month after his arrival, Oliver was working late in the workshop, attempting to repair a particularly challenging pocket watch that had been brought in that day. Thomas had gone to dinner with Mr. Elliot to discuss the final legal arrangements for Oliver's guardianship, leaving Oliver alone in the shop for the first time. The pocket watch was unusual, gold with intricate engravings that seemed to shift and change depending on how the light hit them. The customer, a nervous man in an expensive suit, had been adamant that it be repaired by the next day, offering triple the usual fee for the rush job. Thomas had been reluctant to accept the commission, studying the watch with a frown before finally agreeing when the man mentioned it was a family heirloom needed for his daughter's wedding. Even then, he had warned Oliver not to attempt the repair himself, to wait until morning when they could examine it together. But Oliver, eager to prove himself, had returned to the workshop after Thomas left. The watch called to him somehow, its mechanism unlike any he had seen before. The usual configuration of gears and springs was present, but there was something else. A small chamber filled with what looked like liquid light, pulsing gently with the movement of the balance wheel. Fascinated, Oliver carefully opened the chamber with specialized tools. The moment he did, the light spilled out, not as liquid but as pure energy, wrapping around his hands and arms in tendrils of golden brilliance. The sensation was not painful, but exhilarating, as if every cell in his body had suddenly awakened. And then, the workshop around him began to change. The solid walls and floor seemed to become transparent, revealing layers of time beneath them. The same space but in different eras, occupied by different people. Oliver saw a young Thomas working alongside his father, saw himself as a small child sitting on his father's knee, saw generations of Hayes clockmakers moving back through time like reflections in an infinite mirror. Most shocking of all, he saw his parents on what must have been the day of the accident. They were arguing, his father agitated, his mother resolute. "It's not safe, Eleanor," his father was saying. "If Blackwood discovers what we've done, he already suspects," his mother replied, her voice echoing strangely across time. "The watch is the only proof. We have to move it tonight, James. We have no choice." The vision faded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Oliver gasping and disoriented, the workshop solid around him once more. The light had retreated back into the watch, which now ticked steadily on the workbench, apparently repaired by the strange energy's passage through Oliver's hands. Oliver stared at the watch, then at his hands, which tingled with residual energy. What had just happened? What had he seen? And who was Blackwood? The bell above the shop door jingled, startling him out of his shocked stupor. Thomas wasn't due back for hours. Carefully placing the watch in a drawer, Oliver moved to the workshop door, peering into the darkened shop beyond. A man stood in the center of the room, tall and impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed to absorb the shadows around him. His silver hair was slicked back from a face that might have been handsome, if not for the coldness in his pale eyes. He moved through the shop with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged wherever he chose to be. "Hello?" Oliver called, stepping into the shop. "I'm sorry, but we're closed." The man turned, his gaze landing on Oliver with such intensity that the boy took an involuntary step back. "Oliver Hayes," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured. "How remarkable to find you here after all this time. You look so much like your father." A smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Emerson Blackwood." Oliver froze, the name from the vision echoing in his mind. This was the man his parents had feared, the man they had been hiding something from on the day they died. "What do you want?" Oliver asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "The shop is closed." Blackwood's smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Oh, I'm not here for a repair, young Mr. Hayes. I'm here for something that belongs to me. Something your parents, borrowed. Without permission." He moved closer, his gaze sweeping the workshop visible through the open door. "A pocket watch. Quite unique. I believe you may have recently acquired it." Oliver's blood ran cold. How could Blackwood know about the watch that had just been brought in? Unless he had sent the nervous man in the expensive suit. "I don't know what you're talking about," Oliver said, backing toward the workshop where the watch was hidden. "We have lots of watches here. This one is special," Blackwood said, following Oliver's retreat with measured steps. "It contains what you might call a family heirloom of my own. One that your parents had no right to take." His expression hardened. "The accident that claimed their lives was most unfortunate. It would be a shame if history were to repeat itself." The threat hung in the air between them, blatant and chilling. Oliver's mind raced. This man had something to do with his parents' deaths. Deaths that perhaps weren't accidental at all. And now he was here, threatening Oliver over a watch that somehow contained the liquid light, the strange energy that had shown him visions of the past. "Mr. Whitaker will be back any minute," Oliver lied, reaching behind him for anything that might serve as a weapon. His hand closed around a heavy brass paperweight shaped like a clock face. "You should leave." Blackwood laughed, the sound entirely without humor. "Thomas Whitaker is currently engaged across town, thanks to my associate, Mr. Elliot. I'm afraid your guardian has been misled about the nature of tonight's meeting." Oliver's stomach dropped. Mr. Elliot, the lawyer who had found him, who had reunited him with Thomas, was working with Blackwood? Had the whole thing been a setup to get to the watch? No, that couldn't be right. Thomas had been searching for him for years. The shop, the apartment, his parents' things, all of it was real. The legacy was real. The legacy. Suddenly Oliver understood. The Hayes family secret, the special clocks his father had created, his mother's research on the nature of time itself, it all connected to what he had just experienced with the watch. The Hayes family weren't just clockmakers. They were something more. Something Blackwood wanted badly enough to kill for. "The watch isn't here," Oliver said, mind working frantically. "My father hid it years ago before the accident. I don't know where it is." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "You're lying, boy. I can see it in your face. You have the same tell as your father. a slight twitch at the corner of your mouth. He moved closer, backing Oliver against the workshop door. I will find what I seek, with or without your cooperation. But things will go much easier for you if you simply hand it over. Oliver's fingers tightened around the brass paperweight. He had lost his parents, had lost 3 years of his life to loneliness and uncertainty. He would not lose his newfound legacy to this man. My father believes some things are worth protecting, he said, finding courage in the memory of the vision, in the determination he had seen on his parents' faces. Whatever this watch does, whatever it means, he didn't want you to have it. That's good enough for me. Blackwood's face darkened with anger. You have no idea what you're dealing with, boy. That watch contains the key to controlling time itself. With it, the bearer can do more than see the past. They can change it. He reached inside his jacket, withdrawing a small silver pistol that gleamed in the dim light. Now, for the last time, where is it? Oliver's heart hammered in his chest, but his mind had gone strangely calm. The music box. The message in the hidden compartment. Find your way home. Home wasn't just the shop or the apartment. Home was the legacy, the understanding of what the Hayes family had protected for generations. And somehow, Oliver knew exactly where his father would have hidden something so precious. It's in the music box, he said, the lie coming easily now. The one I fixed when I found your note. There's a second hidden compartment that only opens when the melody plays all the way through. Blackwood's expression flickered with interest and suspicion. Where is this music box? Upstairs in my room, Oliver said. I can show you. After a moment's consideration, Blackwood gestured with the pistol. Lead the way. But remember, boy, any tricks and this ends badly for you. Oliver led Blackwood through the workshop and up the stairs to the apartment, his mind racing ahead. The music box was indeed in his room, sitting on the nightstand where he left it each night. But there was no second hidden compartment, no watch concealed within. He needed to buy time, needed Thomas to return before Blackwood realized the deception. As they entered the apartment, Oliver moved with deliberate slowness, turning on lights, making his footsteps heavy on the wooden floors. Anything to alert a neighbor, to draw attention to the intruder. The music box is in my bedroom, he said, leading Blackwood down the hallway past the living room. It's been in my family for generations. Spare me the history lesson, Blackwood snapped. Just get the watch. They reached Oliver's room, the door with its painted stars standing slightly ajar. Oliver pushed it open, revealing the music box on the nightstand, its brass surface gleaming in the lamplight. There, he said, pointing. It's inside. Blackwood studied the music box with narrowed eyes. Open it. Oliver approached the nightstand, lifting the music box carefully. His fingers found the key, wound it slowly, building tension. The moment the melody began to play, filling the room with its sweet, familiar notes, Oliver made his move. With all his strength, he hurled the music box directly at Blackwood's face. The heavy brass object struck the man squarely on the forehead, sending him staggering backward with a howl of pain and rage. The pistol fired, the shot going wide and embedding itself in the ceiling. Oliver didn't wait to see if Blackwood recovered. He bolted from the room, racing down the hallway toward the front door. But Blackwood was faster than his age suggested, recovering quickly and lunging after Oliver with murderous fury. A hand closed around Oliver's ankle, sending him crashing to the floor. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, leaving him gasping as Blackwood loomed over him, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead where the music box had struck. You little fool! Blackwood snarled, the refined veneer gone, replaced by naked malice. Just like your parents, too stubborn to know when they're beaten. He raised the pistol, aiming it at Oliver's heart. Tell me where the watch is, or I swear I'll... The apartment door burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Thomas stood in the doorway, his normally kind face transformed by a cold fury that made him almost unrecognizable. Get away from him, Blackwood. Thomas growled, advancing into the apartment with purposeful strides. You've taken enough from this family. Blackwood spun, keeping the gun trained on Oliver while facing this new threat. Whitaker, always the loyal dog. I wondered how long it would take you to realize Elliot had led you on a wild goose chase. His lip curled in a sneer. Too late, as usual. The boy was just about to tell me where James hid the Chronos watch. Thomas's eyes flicked to Oliver, concern warring with something else. Pride, perhaps, at seeing the boy still defiant despite the danger. Oliver knows nothing about the watch. James made sure of that, to protect him from men like you. Then he's of no use to me, Blackwood said coldly, the gun steady in his hand. A shame. The Hayes line ends here, it seems. What happened next occurred so quickly that Oliver would later struggle to recall the exact sequence. Thomas lunged forward with surprising speed for a man his size. Blackwood fired twice in rapid succession. There was a cry of pain, a struggle, the gun clattering to the floor, and then silence broken only by harsh breathing and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Oliver scrambled to his feet, heart in his throat. Thomas and Blackwood lay on the floor, locked in a deadly embrace. For one terrible moment, Oliver couldn't tell who had been shot, who had won the brief, violent struggle. Then Thomas pushed himself up, grimacing in pain, blood staining his left shoulder. Beneath him, Blackwood lay unconscious, a rapidly darkening bruise spreading across his temple, where Thomas had slammed his head against the hardwood floor. "Thomas!" Oliver cried, rushing to the older man's side. "You're hurt." Thomas managed a weak smile. "It's just a graze. I've had worse shaving." He winced as he pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" Oliver shook his head, tears of relief and delayed fear filling his eyes. "I'm okay, but he said my parents' accident wasn't an accident, that he was responsible." Thomas's expression darkened. "Blackwood has been after your family's work for decades. Your father refused to help him weaponize the technology, so Blackwood decided to take it by force." He glanced at the unconscious man with disgust. "The police never found enough evidence to charge him, but I always knew." The sound of sirens grew louder, then stopped abruptly as police cars pulled up outside the shop. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, and suddenly the apartment was filled with officers, their questions and radios creating a chaos that seemed to exist at a distance from the bubble of quiet understanding that had formed around Oliver and Thomas. As paramedics tended to Thomas's wound and officers handcuffed the still unconscious Blackwood, Oliver retrieved the music box from his bedroom floor. It was dented on one side from the impact with Blackwood's head, but when he wound it, the melody played true, if slightly warped in a way that gave the familiar tune an otherworldly quality. Thomas watched him with knowing eyes. "You told him the watch was in the music box," he said quietly, wincing as a paramedic cleaned his wound. Quick thinking. Oliver sat beside Thomas on the couch, the music box cradled in his hands. "I saw something, Thomas. When I opened the watch that man brought in today, I saw terrain at one time. I saw my parents on the day they died. They were talking about hiding the watch from Blackwood." Thomas's eyes widened. "You opened the Chronos watch? And you saw through time?" He glanced around to ensure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Oliver, what you experienced is the Hayes legacy. Your family has been creating timepieces that can glimpse the currents of time for generations. Most can only show what was or what is, but the Chronos watch is different. Your parents discovered that it could potentially do more, change the past, not just view it. Is that why Blackwood wanted it? To change the past?" Thomas nodded grimly. "To rewrite history in his favor. Imagine the power of being able to undo any mistake, eliminate any opponent before they became a threat." He sighed heavily. "Your parents realized how dangerous the watch was and decided to hide it. They were on their way to a secure location when their car crashed. I always suspected Blackwood was behind it, but could never prove it." Oliver looked down at the music box in his hands, then back at Thomas. "I told Blackwood the watch was in here to distract him. But what if it is? What if that's what my father meant by find your way home?" Thomas's eyes lit with sudden understanding. "The music was always what centered you as a child. Your father said it connected you to your heritage, to the Hayes sense of time." He reached for the music box with his uninjured arm. "May I?" Oliver handed it over, watching as Thomas examined the dented case with expert eyes. His fingers found a nearly invisible seam along the bottom, pressed in a specific pattern that matched the rhythm of the melody's opening notes. With a soft click, a second hidden compartment opened. Not the one Oliver had found that contained the photograph and key, but a deeper, more carefully concealed space. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a pocket watch identical to the one Oliver had opened in the workshop. "The Chronos watch," Thomas breathed, lifting it reverently. "James did hide it in the music box. He knew you would find it when the time was right." Oliver stared at the watch, remembering the strange liquid light, the visions of the past. "What do I do with it?" Thomas carefully returned the watch to its hiding place and closed the compartment. "For now, nothing. It stays hidden until you're ready, until you fully understand your legacy and the responsibility that comes with it." He smiled gently at Oliver. "Your father believed that time reveals all treasures to those patient enough to wait. He was right. You found your way home, just as he hoped you would, As the police finished their work and the paramedics prepared to take Thomas to the hospital for proper treatment, Oliver stood at the window of the apartment, looking down at the street below. Blackwood was being led to a police car, his elegant suit rumpled, his composed facade shattered. The music box sat on the windowsill beside Oliver, its melody silenced for now but still alive within him, connecting him to his past and pointing toward his future. He thought of the watch hidden within, of the power it contained, of the legacy that was now his to protect. 3 months ago, he had been an orphan boy with nothing but broken things and fragmented memories. Now he stood in his childhood home, surrounded by the evidence of his family's extraordinary history, with a guardian who had never stopped searching for him and a purpose that stretched back generations. Oliver Hayes had fixed a broken music box and unknowingly unlocked his family's secret legacy. But in doing so, he had also fixed something in himself, the broken pieces of his heart, the disconnected fragments of his identity. He had found his way home, not just to a place, but to himself. As Thomas joined him at the window, arm in a sling but spirit undiminished, Oliver felt a certainty that had been missing since the day his parents died. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets the Hayes legacy still held, he would face them with the patience and precision of a true clockmaker. One moment, one gear, one heartbeat at a time. After all, as his father had written, time was the greatest gift they had. And Oliver Hayes, keeper of time and heir to an extraordinary legacy, had all the time in the world.